For the first time in 6 years, Alabama is defending nothing. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, running through the schedules in the Power 5 for 2020. We have finished the Big Ten. Please check out our record projections for the teams in the Big Ten, plus our schedule previews for every team again in the Power 5. We start our journey in the SEC with perennial champion Alabama, dethroned, of course, in 2019 by LSU. And again, for the first time in 6 years, the Tide is defending no championships. In 2014, they won the SEC. In 2015, the SEC and the national championship. In 2016, the SEC. In 2017, did not win the SEC, but won the national championship. And in 2018, they were the SEC champions once again. So for the first time since a kick-six loss to Auburn, and falling in the Sugar Bowl to Oklahoma at the conclusion of 2013, Alabama goes into a season with no championships to defend. That may change here in 2020. This is a very talented football team. Let's check out what is a pretty difficult run through the SEC, which includes a game against most likely the best team in the SEC Eastern Division, a three-time champion Georgia. Let's start at the beginning with USC. These two teams got together 4 years ago in 2016. For the Trojans, it turned out to be a tremendous season, ranked top 5 in the country after a Rose Bowl win and 11 wins under Sam Darnold. Unfortunately, he was on the sideline as the Tide butchered USC and Max Brown 52-6. Of course, that was the game in which Jalen Hurts became the starting quarterback at Alabama and never relinquished the role until Tua Tagovailoa came along. And of course, the Tide marched on to the national championship game against Clemson. So 52-6 that time. We hope to see a better game this time around. Same site, Arlington, Texas, Alabama, and USC. Georgia State's the win in Week 2 before the huge SEC matchup against the Bulldogs of Georgia. The much-anticipated game between the teams that have owned the East and Western Division for the most part over the past 5 or 6 seasons. They have played two monumental national championship and SEC championship games following 2017 and 2018, games in which the Bulldogs led by double digits in the fourth quarter and lost both games in excruciating fashion against Alabama. So the Tide in Tuscaloosa hosting Georgia in Week 3. We call that one a bit of a toss-up. And again, our T for toss-up isn't a classic 50-50 toss-up. Just means each team has a reasonable chance of winning. Give the Tide about a 70% chance at home of beating Georgia, maybe the most talented roster in the country. Certainly the recruiting rankings would speak to Georgia having the most talented roster in all of college football. Kent State breaks up the conference schedule. Then Alabama goes on the road to take on a former friend, Lane Kiffin, at Ole Miss and at Arkansas. And then Mississippi State at home, a team that has given Bama trouble at times. And then, of course, at Tennessee and LSU, the Volunteers are much improved under Jeremy Pruitt over the back half of 2019 against lesser opponents. Of course, LSU knocked Alabama off the top of the SEC last season, winning a tremendous game in Tuscaloosa 46-41, so the Tide will have to get back at LSU in Death Valley, where they had won umpteen consecutive games and continue to win, own that winning streak going to LSU in November. Interesting to note that the SEC takes care of both Alabama and LSU prior to the big game with bye weeks. Similar, Alabama and Auburn are typically taken care of with a matchup against the FCS lightweights in late November before the Iron Bowl. But this time around, a bit of a change-up to the SEC schedule as Alabama takes on UT Martin after its trip to Death Valley. Then they take on Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher in Tuscaloosa. Tide won that game pretty easily by 3 scores at Kyle Field last year. And then the Iron Bowl returns to Tuscaloosa after the double pick sixes by Mac Jones last year led to the Tide's defeat in the missed field goal in the final 4 minutes, 48-45, but they've got Auburn at home in the Iron Bowl. So Alabama coming off an 11-2 record, the 2 losses to Auburn by a field goal, LSU, in which Alabama gave them probably their toughest game of the season, 46-41, although the Auburn score was closer, 23-20. Alabama coming off a 6-2 SEC campaign, looking to reclaim its grip on the SEC. I've got the Tide projected right now to finish 11-1, 7-1 in the SEC. They've got difficult dates against Georgia, the trip to LSU, Auburn at home, maybe Texas A&M can give them a scare, Tennessee on the road, a possible difficult game for the Tide. 11-1, 7-1 in the SEC for Alabama. Our spring projection, we have yet to break down the real personnel groupings this summer, and of course we'll have our final prediction coming up at the end of August. Need to hear from you now. Your record projection, your thoughts on Alabama football for 2020, right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.